Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. 6 weeks before he presents the budget, just how confident of the state of the Indian economy is the Finance Minister? And given his commitment to sustain 8% growth and take it up to 10%, how will he tackle the challenges he faces? Those are two of the key questions that I shall put today in an exclusive interview to P Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram, let's start with the state of the economy 6 weeks before you present the budget. Both you and the Prime Minister are committed to sustaining 8% growth and you want to take it up to 10%. But on the 31st of December, the editor of the Business Standard wrote that the economy is slowing down. How do you respond to that?
I don't agree. I met with a number of economists today. I don't think you would draw conclusions based on a figure here or a statistic there. We think that investment is booming. We think that non-food credit, which is growing at, which means bank credit to industry, is growing at about 30%. And these are indicators of a growing economy.
Let me give you
and
the
I
facts.
think at the end of the year, you will find growth rate of over 7%.
Let me give you the facts that the editor of the Business Standard was pointing towards. He says that in September, you had single-digit growth in exports, which in fact ended up in November in decline. Yesterday, you've released figures which show that the index of industrial production has slipped from 7.7 to 6.9, and you have a looming oil threat that you can do nothing about. How worried are you by those pointers?
Every finance minister is always worried, but I don't think you have to worry to a point that you think growth is slowing down.
So he's exaggerating.
Well, I think he's worrying too much.
He's taking on your job and overdoing it.
Well, I wish he did.
Let me put it like this. How confident are you that you can sustain the 8% growth that we've seen in the last 2 quarters?
I didn't say that we will do 8% this year. Growth is a function of investment. Unless the investment increases, you cannot achieve 8% growth. We will achieve, and I've said this more than once, over 7% growth, which on the back of a 6.9% growth last year is, I think, good performance.
Except for the fact that it makes all talk of 10% growth, which the Prime Minister has frequently spoken of, seem and sound like a pipe dream.
It's not a pipe dream. Prime Minister has to set for his government high goals. The 10% growth is eminently achievable provided we raise the investment as a proportion of GDP to about, say, 32%. We are not near that because we don't mobilize more domestic investment in this country, and we don't throw open the doors for more foreign direct investment.
So 10% growth, in a sense, is a challenge the government is holding up to itself.
Yes.
In which case, how achievable is that challenge in the remaining 3.5 years of your government?
If we continue to open up the economy, continue to mobilize public investment and private investment in India, keep the investment climate friendly to the investor, and, this is critical, attract larger doses of foreign direct investment, we can achieve it in the last of the 3 years that you talked about.
All right. It's very interesting that your answer had 3 ifs, maybe 4.
Yes.
Let's look at some of the challenges that lie ahead, because it's only if you achieve those that you can achieve your dream of 10%. Perhaps the biggest challenge is what's considered the appalling state of India's infrastructure. Speaking to the India Economic Summit in November, you said, we are acutely and actually conscious that there is a huge infrastructure deficiency in this country. What we lack, you said, is a killer instinct.
Correct.
Do you think you're doing enough to tackle the problem?
Not enough, but better than before. Delhi Metro, for example, is on schedule and ahead of time. The Hyderabad airport will be on schedule, perhaps ahead of time.
But there's confusion about Delhi and Bombay airports.
I'll
that
come
seems
to
to
that.
grow every
That's a
day.
separate issue. We'll come to that. But I think there is greater awareness that projects must be implemented on time, and that time overruns and cost overruns are causing this deficit. See, there are still many areas where there's not enough consciousness about time overruns and cost overruns.
You're absolutely correct when you say that, because there is awareness that there's a problem, but there's not enough being done about the problem, because industrialists turn out and say that India's ports, airports, power and road are in a mess. For instance, you have ports that are clogged up and ships waiting up to 3 weeks. You have airports where the stacking up time for incoming flights is perhaps 30 minutes. Industry says that up to 30% of the power it uses is self-generated. Far from getting better, they say the problem's getting worse.
Part of this is a consequence of high growth. If you had low growth, our ports would be empty. Our airports would receive fewer aircraft.
So your success is making our problem worse?
Because we are growing at a fast rate, and the infrastructure is not expanding at a rate to meet that fast growth rate.
But equally
in fact,
then,
our ports, Karan, our ports are doing much better than ever before.
But equally, if this problem is being exacerbated by your success, then it's also a stop to greater success. It works both ways, doesn't it?
It does. That's why we have to quickly raise the rate of implementation of infrastructure projects, which is why we are advocating public-private partnership. We're advocating greater space for the private sector. We are also advocating greater autonomy for the public sector, which is implementing projects.
You say you need to raise the rate of investment in infrastructure, and yet your critics turn around and say precisely at the same time as he says this, in the last budget, planned expenditure on capital account fell by over 40%. And although Mr. Chidambaram turns around and says this is more than compensated by what the states themselves will be putting in, he knows better than anyone else that states have deficit problems and can't raise money.
No, please. The critics must read the budget document in the correct way. On the 1st of April 2005, there was a paradigm change. Government until then was giving both grants and loans to the state government. From 1/4/2005, we give only grants. So the loan portion has to be raised by the state government.
And they are not able to do it because their deficits are huge, their capacity to raise money is limited, so the amount spent on infrastructure shrinks.
Outdated information. State governments have raised the borrowing that was sanctioned to them. In fact, they are sitting on 40,000 crore of cash balances as of last week. Therefore, when you compare, you have to compare oranges and oranges or apples and apples. You cannot compare the figure on the budget document this year with the figure last year without making the adjustment for this change brought about by the 12th Finance Commission.
You're obviously trying to reassure your critics on the critical issue of investment in infrastructure. Let me put it like this, because this would reassure them more than anything else. What order of increase in spending on infrastructure are we likely to see in your forthcoming budget?
Substantial, if you count irrigation, roads, power, ports, airports, and telecom. Point is, most people miss the public investment in irrigation, which is largely state-funded. If you count all that, you will find a substantial step up in total public investment. Then you have to add private investment, and I said this a moment earlier. Never before has there been such a high level of investment by the private sector.
So the two together will more than adequately tackle your critics' concerns that Chidambaram is not spending enough on infrastructure.
Actually, planned expenditure this year is running higher than any year in the last 4 or 5 years.
Let's then come to the second challenge you face. If infrastructure you're confident of tackling, the second challenge that you face in terms of achieving 10% growth is agriculture.
Correct.
Both you and the Prime Minister have spoken of the need for 4% growth. But the truth is that in the last 8 years, growth has been below 2% every single year. The average for 55 years is probably 2.8%. So is your dream of 4% achievable?
Yes, it is, provided there's massive investment in irrigation. That is a neglected area.
Which you just promised.
No, we've started doing it. In fact, the AIBP has been expanded. States are being encouraged to spend more on irrigation than anything else. Andhra Pradesh is a classic example. We are working on a huge project with the World Bank to restore all water bodies in this country. Irrigation is the key to enhancing agricultural growth. The other key is value-added agriculture. You cannot achieve 4% growth by simply growing more wheat and more paddy.
Absolutely.
We have to have value-added agriculture.
Which means that, in fact, you also need more non-farm jobs in the countryside. And that's where you have a critical problem.
Well, non-farm job incomes will not be added to the agriculture sector. So that is an additionality. But even in the farm sector, what Maharashtra has done, what Punjab and Haryana are promising to do and have done substantially. The National Horticulture Mission that has been launched, if you concentrate on non-cereal agricultural produce and then processed food industry, you can achieve 4% growth in the agriculture.
The reason I mentioned non-farm jobs in the countryside is because with agricultural growth below 2% and manufacturing simply not creating sufficient jobs, you have an army of 300 to 400 million who are underemployed. If you want 10% growth, you have to give them proper jobs.
You're absolutely right. I thought we were talking about agricultural growth. So agricultural growth means farm output. So for farm output, it's not enough to grow only wheat and paddy, we have to grow other crops.
And what about these 300 to 400 million who are underemployed?
These have to be found jobs off farm or non-farm, or in manufacturing, or in the low end of the services sector, which is one reason why we are arguing for opening up the retail sector.
Absolutely, and that's where some of your problems begin, because without more manufacturing and without more FDI, you won't have jobs. This is exactly what you said to the India Economic Summit when you said we must open the doors far and wide for FDI in more sectors. FDI worked wonders in China. I believe it can work wonders in India. The left don't agree with you, and you're in no position to call their bluff.
Well, I think it's too drastic a conclusion to say they don't agree with me. They agree with me, but they want limitations placed. Now, what we're trying to tell them is these limitations, while they may appear to be good from our point of view, will actually inhibit the investor.
But they're not believing you.
Well, more and more they are. Some are. Chief Minister of West Bengal believes me.
Prakash Karat doesn't seem to.
No. Prakash, in fact, is pretty open-minded. But he has his colleagues, he has his trade unions. Prakash, in
You
fact...
mean his hands are tied behind his back by trade unionists that he can't influence sufficiently and sufficiently?
That I cannot answer. That question you should ask him. But I get the impression that one can engage Prakash in a dialogue and bring him around. But he has his compulsions, and therefore he has to reflect his compulsions.
Is that the triumph of hope over experience? Because your dream...
On the contrary, the last 12 months is a triumph of experience over hope.
Well, you say so, but look at your dream of increasing FDI. For instance, in insurance, it's been aborted. You talk of greater...
But I have not brought the bill yet.
You've been promising it since 2004.
The bill is being drafted, you see.
It's a long time that you've taken. 18 months, the country's written it off.
No, it hasn't. I'll tell you why. You are talking about amending one section. I can't bring an amendment for one section. I'm amending the entire insurance laws.
Meanwhile, the American ambassador has publicly accused you of breach of faith.
Well, he clarified it by saying he was not accusing the government of India. He was reflecting opinions expressed by other people. But
even more importantly, reflecting opinions expressed by the very people whose FDI
correct.
You want to invite.
But
they've lost faith in you.
Nevertheless, the insurance companies are, under the present regime, investing in India and acquiring a larger market share.
When will the bill which you promised in 2004 happen? This budget session?
Insurance laws amendment bill will happen.
To permit increased FDI in
One
insurance.
of the clauses will have that.
That is a commitment.
Yes.
You're not going to back out of it.
Well, I'll introduce the bill.
Will the left let you pass it?
I hope so.
What does hope so mean?
I'll persuade them to.
Will you succeed?
I don't know.
What about FDI in areas like banking, retail and mining? You're talking about them. The left is dead against them.
Let's take them one by one. Retail, we have made it very clear that this is a dialogue, and this dialogue will have to run its course.
But as far as Prakash Karat is concerned, his ears are deaf to what you're saying.
I don't think so. I think we are looking at several options, and I think the Commerce Minister has spoken about these options. Single brand as an option, metro cities as an option. These are options. These options are being discussed.
Can I ask you a simple question? Will we see FDI in retail before the calendar end of 2006?
No, I can't promise a date like that, but we will begin to see a consensus on the issue of opening retail to FDI in a selective way.
What does consensus on the issue mean? It sounds like a euphemism for saying nothing much is going to happen.
No, this country can only be run on consensus, much as you would like me to run it as if I was a dictator.
But the consensus at the moment is against FDI, not in favor of it.
I don't agree. The consensus is in favor of expanding the retail sector. Question is, in which part of the retail sector will you allow FDI?
And will you be able to get a satisfactory answer that it brings to the country the quantity of FDI that you think you need?
See, FDI will come. It's already come in the cash and carry segment. It has come in the wholesale segment.
But not in retail.
Yes, in retail is the next step. It will come.
And that step will be taken during the tenure of this government. I've expanded it from calendar 2006 by 3 years.
Without question.
Without question.
Yes.
In other words, before you demit office as a government,
Yes.
retail FDI will have happened.
In some sectors of retail.
But it will have happened.
I think so. Yes.
Again, that's a commitment you're making.
A commitment I make, and I'm going to try to keep it.
Try to keep it. Will the left let you?
I think so.
Think so, you're not sure.
Well, how can I speak for the left? I can only persuade them. How can I speak for you for that matter?
Let's let that smile speak for you. Let it be a smile of confidence. Let the left be captivated by it. Let's take a break, Mr. Chidambaram. I want to come back, and after the break, I want to talk about the flip side of the equation, the pressures you face to spend money and the impact that could have on the deficits you have to contend with. We'll be back in a moment's time for the second part of this interview. Don't go away. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an exclusive interview with the Finance Minister. Mr. Chidambaram, you face enormous pressures to spend money. The government is committed to 174,000 crore on Bharat Nirman, 170,000 crore on the highways program, 60,000 crore on urban renewal, another 25,000 on the railway freight corridor, and on top of all that, there's the National Rural Employment Guarantee and there's Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Where are you going to find the money for all of this?
Well, we've worked out where we're going to find the money. Bulk of it will come from domestic resources. There's space for the private sector in many of these programs, and there will be external funding too.
Well, your great hope was to raise some money through disinvestment of shares in profitable non-Navratna PSUs. The left doesn't seem to like it, and now it seems your allies in government don't like it either. So are we going to see any meaningful disinvestment at all?
It happened yesterday.
But two of the companies you wanted to disinvest were taken off under DMK pressure.
How do you know that?
All the papers say so.
Wrong.
So Neyveli is lignite is going to be disinvested.
We don't announce these decisions. These are price-sensitive decisions.
So newspaper reports on all the economic pages on Friday that the DMK has put pressure and NDMC and Neyveli are off the list are wrong?
I neither confirm it nor deny it, because these are price-sensitive matters.
In other words, there's a good possibility that these two companies could be disinvested.
You can draw your own conclusion. The point is, it's not important which company is disinvested. What is important is, are we able to identify 3 or 4 companies to begin the disinvestment this year?
And what's the answer?
Answer is yes.
And will this be a one-off defiance of your own allies on the left, or will it be a sustained, continuing disinvestment program?
With the left, we have reached agreement that we keep the Navaratnas out. In the non-Navaratnas, we can disinvest small portions of our equity, raise funds, and put it in the National Investment Fund.
And this will be a continuing disinvestment program, not a one-off act.
Of course, it's a continuing program until I build a huge fund.
Now, the left turned around and said that, in fact, you ought to raise resources for all the programs that we mentioned at the beginning of this part of the interview by raising the tax GDP ratio.
Well, they're absolutely right. One is not a substitute for the other.
Do you believe, as they say, that India is an under-taxed country?
No. I think the tax rates are reasonable. The effective tax rate on SSE is low in this country because of numerous exemptions.
So you're going to increase that?
I'm not going to increase any rate. I'm going to improve the tax administration.
What about specific requests from the left for inheritance tax, a tax on what they call 5-star consumption, and a tax on private cars that use diesel? Are you considering those?
Obviously, I can't say yes or no to that question.
But are you inclined towards a belief that there are areas of such taxation that need to be tapped?
I'm always inclined to consider any idea.
So there are people listening to who are going to conclude that maybe Mr. Chidambaram is going to turn the screws on and eating in hotels is going to become more expensive, or buying a diesel car is going to become more prohibitive.
Well, let me tell you, viewers, there's no reason to reach such a conclusion. I have given tax breaks, I've imposed new taxes, but overall, this government has left more money in the pockets of consumers and taxpayers.
Are you intending to leave it there, or are you intending to tap it with tax?
There will always be more money in the pockets of consumers.
Even after you've increased the tax?
I didn't say anything about increasing the tax. Those are your words.
Absolutely, but you're not saying what you could have said with the greatest
Because I
of
can't
ease.
say it to you. This is not February 28 and you're not Parliament.
So there's a real possibility that inheritance tax, just to take that as an example, could be imposed.
I don't say yes, I don't say no, because whatever I say, it's like saying, have you stopped beating your wife? You can't answer that question.
Let's turn to the question of fiscal deficits and revenue deficits. Many people say that he faces so many pressures to spend money that, like last year when he had to hit the pause button in terms of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, he's going to have to do the same thing this year again.
Again, you got the statement wrong. We hit the pause button only on the revenue deficit. We did not hit the pause button on the fiscal deficit.
But you didn't achieve what you had to achieve on the fiscal deficit, did
Wrong.
you?
We achieved it last year and we are on course to achieve it this year.
So then, just for clarification, will in fact on the 28th of February the Finance Minister be announcing that the fiscal deficit is going to come down further to 4% and that the revenue deficit is going to come down to 2.2%? Because that would reassure people.
I think your numbers are wrong. You've got your numbers wrong. The point is, last year we paused on the revenue deficit because of the one-off extra devolution as a result of the 12th Finance Commission. And that has been explained in a whole paragraph in the budget speech. This year, I have said we are obliged to adhere to the FRBM discipline, and I'm going to make every effort to achieve the FRBM
what
goals.
What does every effort mean?
Because I can't tell you, today is not February 28. I wish you were a member of Parliament.
Are you aware that if this year round, for whatever explanation you give, you don't abide by your FRBM commitments, the country would take a very adverse view of that?
No, the country will measure us by growth rate, by infrastructure, by delivery of services. The
so you're saying that whether you achieve your deficit commitments or not actually won't matter. Are you preparing the country? Are you preparing the country for failure?
It will matter to me, it will matter to economists, it will matter to analysts. I was only responding to your question that the man in my village is worried about fiscal deficit. He's worried about drinking water, he's worried about sanitation, he's worried about roads.
The man who reads the pink papers is worried about the fiscal deficit. And what message are you sending him as he listens to you speak in this interview?
Well, I wish some of your viewers are readers of pink papers. The message that I give that viewer is, India's economy is in the safe hands of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Don't worry.
Is the deficit target going to be met?
Yes.
Yes. I won't press you for that, but you're saying yes.
But I don't think you know what the deficit targets are.
But the deficit...
I said FRBM targets will be met.
FRBM targets will be met. You will bring down the revenue deficit to the required 2.2%.
You wait until February 28 to see the figures, because you don't know the difference between, I think you don't know, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to complain. I think you don't know the difference between RE and actuals. So I'm not giving you any figures now.
Quite right. Because in fact, your REs might change the actuals that you have to play with. But anyway, that settled down, you're still saying you'll meet the commitment.
I've said that more than once, that I'm obliged to meet the FRBM targets, and I intend to meet those targets.
Let's then come to two issues that are agitating industry in particular. The fringe benefit tax. FICCI, CII, ASSOCHAM, the Punjab Haryana Chamber of Commerce, all of them have asked you to remove this. Why won't you?
No, that's not correct. All of them have met me, minus the PHDCI. They met me and said, we understand your difficulty in removing the tax, and I'll tell you why. Perquisites are taxed universally. In India, they were taxed until 1997 as perquisites under Section 37. It was I who removed Section 37 because they complained against the disallowance method. We're getting into technicalities now. Perquisites are taxed universally. The FBT, or a perquisites tax, has vertical equity and horizontal equity. There's no country in the world which does not tax perquisites. So finally, their request is, please simplify the tax, which I said I would.
Well, in fact, their request goes beyond simplification. The chairman of the CBDT himself has said that the tax is traumatic, and he's revealed that up till December, you've only raised 1,780 crore out of a target of 4,000. So is it worth the trouble?
The outgoing chairman of the CBDT, in a speech in Kolkata, 3 days before he demitted office, said, and he added, I'm saying this in a light-hearted way.
But he was still speaking the truth.
Well, you wouldn't let me complete the sentence. He said, and he added, you're missing the crucial words. He said, in a light-hearted way, I agree that this could be a trauma for you. He said, in a light-hearted way, I'm saying this.
Many a truth is spoken in jest. The truth is
The truth
that
is not, it's not dramatic.
industrialists would prefer
No.
this to be removed. They're saying to you,
No.
if you need to raise the money, raise it by increasing corporate tax.
There's no horizontal equity in that.
So you're committed to the FBT. You may
FBT
simplify it, but the tax
FBT will
stay.
remain.
FBT will remain.
Yes.
What about then the threat of reservations in the private sector? Many industrialists feel that this would be a retrograde step. At least if your cabinet colleagues have said the bill will be brought in the budget session. Where do you as finance minister stand?
There's a group of ministers which is considering this matter. I'm part of the group, so I can't give you my personal view. All that I believe the NCMP has said is affirmative action in the private sector. There's a dialogue with the private sector. This is chaired by Mr. Sharad Pawar. It's premature to anticipate what the group will recommend. We've got legal opinion, we've got political opinion, we've got opinion of the sections which claim a place in the private sector. We have the opinion of the industry.
Can I simplify it?
Yes.
And let me put it like this. Are you saying to industrialists who are hearing you, don't get worried, this government's not rushing to
No, I can't
impose
speak for the
reservations?
government in this because
So-
there is a GOM.
Then what about the fear? The fear they have of reservations, is that a real fear or are they exaggerating it?
Well, they have expressed concern about reservation, but they have expressed willingness to consider affirmative action.
And which would you prefer of the two?
My personal view is affirmative action,
And not reservation.
but I cannot speak for the government.
But will you try and influence your colleagues?
I can't tell you what I'm going to tell the GOM.
But your personal preference remains affirmative
As an
action.
individual, my personal view is affirmative action.
Mr. Chidambaram, a pleasure talking to you on Devil's Advocate.
Thank you.